Hello internets, while I was working on my next effort video that will focus on RedTube refutations, I came across this little gem, and just had to do a quick response refutation to it. Good Morning America has conducted an interview with Gaige Grosskreutz, as the trial is currently still in progress, and it is one of the most ridiculous pieces of blatantly dishonest propaganda hits on the Rittenhouse trial we have seen yet. So this video will be a piece-by-piece expose on just what is wrong with it.
Now with an ABC News exclusive with Gaige Grosskreutz, the sole survivor shot by Kyle Rittenhouse. After an explosive day in court with Rittenhouse breaking down on the stand, Grosskreutz joins us alongside his attorney Kimberly Motley in his first interview since his dramatic testimony in the murder trial.
Right off the bat, two big problems. One, this is obviously going to be one-sided since it only includes Gaige and his attorney and thus no input from the opposing side. This means the only way to conduct this interview fairly would be if the hosts on Good Morning America act to some degree as the opposition by giving them some cross questions that the defense might have had. Spoiler alert, they aren't going to do this. Problem two, while they are legally allowed to conduct this type of interview during an ongoing trial that has yet to reach a verdict, it's generally considered unprofessional to do so. While the jury is instructed to not watch things like this during the trial, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't. There is a very thin line between an honest interview and a dishonest attempt to influence the outcome of an ongoing case by spewing bullshit outside the courtroom. Second spoiler alert, they are going to cross this line.
Gaige and Kimberly, thank you both so much for joining me this morning. And Gaige, I want to start with you. You were shot in the arm by Kyle Rittenhouse during the protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin last year, while the other two men he shot that night died. With Rittenhouse taking the stand, what did you think of his testimony?
Well, I think anytime you see your would-be murderer on the stand, it's emotional.
Notice the abrupt cut in audio here. This is a major red flag. These responses have obviously been edited, and while it's impossible to verify just what they edited out, it is extremely likely that at least part of the responses have been redone to ensure they best conform to the narrative. And yes, I verified this personally by inspecting the audio stream using Audacity. Wow, this inspection inconspicuously has no background noise whatsoever. That's not suspicious at all. Yeah, I guess they were just hoping nobody would bother to check. So for everyone in the comment section of the GMA video who believed there was some do-over shenanigans going on here, you would be 100% correct. You aren't a conspiracy theorist, you aren't being paranoid, they clipped the interview, no question about it.
And what was your reaction to him breaking down and crying on the stand?
To me, it seemed like a child who had just gotten caught doing something that he wasn't supposed to. More upset that he was caught and less upset about what he had done and what he had taken and the numerous lives that he affected through his actions that night.
This is where we get into the meat of the nonsense and cross the line. Kyle Rittenhouse turned himself in. He didn't get caught, he turned himself in. He voluntarily walked into an Antioch, Illinois police station and confessed his side of the story. Gaige, being as involved in this case as he is, should know this. So from this point forward, we know he is either lying or is completely delusional about the case. Most likely, this is just a desperate attempt to paint himself as the victim by appealing to the audience's emotions. Secondly, everything about Rittenhouse's actions are far more indicative of PTSD, in which, by the way, there's verifiable evidence that he is currently in therapy for this. So if he is crying about getting caught, then why is it his breakdown happened at the specific moment he was asked to recall the events of the shooting and not when he was being escorted in? So Mr. Grosskreitz's take has zero evidence to back it up and makes absolutely no sense. Now, is the host of the show going to give any kind of significant skepticism to this take? Well, let's find out.
And Kimberly, as Gaige's lawyer, what is your take on what we've seen and heard in the courtroom so far?
Nope, no honest attempt at questioning his narrative whatsoever. Just skips right to asking the lawyer for a double down.
Well, I think that it should be recognized that, Mr. Rittenhouse was an active shooter, and that it's important that I believe, as, Gaige has said, that some of his testimony was extremely inconsistent. He was not, I believe, in imminent fear of danger for his own life. Gaige acted and he was not threatening Mr. Rittenhouse. Mr. Rittenhouse rewrapped his gun with Gaige. And I think that's really, really important that, people need to pay attention to the inconsistent statements from the active shooter or the defendant, Rittenhouse.
Everything she just said is either an unverifiable accusation or factually untrue. Notice how she says some of his testimony was inconsistent. Some. doesn't really specify what she is specifically talking about, and then tries to give examples based on what she believes he was supposedly thinking. This is not a falsifiable or provable accusation in any way. Not threatening Rittenhouse? Yeah, except for the fact that there was a mob chasing him down, knocked him off his feet, and we have video evidence to prove this. Pretty sure that counts as threatening. Active shooter? Guess he's guilty until proven innocent. Now, again, is the host going to ask her to specify which contradictory statements she is referencing? Is he going to provide any meaningful question to prevent this interview from being one-sided trash? Again, let's continue.
And Gaige, you testified, and you were injured, but you testified you thought you were going to die that night. Talk to me about what was going through your mind in those moments.
Holy shit. Could you possibly ask a more softball question? Yes, please, Mr. Grosskreutz, please tell us more about your victimhood status and how much of a hero you are.
I mean, there's a million things that run through your mind when somebody's pointing a rifle at you after just having murdered somebody. First and foremost, I was concerned for my safety. I never lost sight of who I am. I'm not somebody who takes a life. I've made a life out of protecting and preserving life, not taking it.
And speaking of protection, you said that you carried a gun for protection that night and that you pointed it at Kyle Rittenhouse. Why did you point your gun at him?
I'm all for the Second Amendment, American citizens' right to bear arms. And I think that during cross-examination, it's hard to say what you want to say. I do believe that in that photo, given the right narrative, one could suggest that, yes, I was pointing my weapon at the defendant. But when you play it as a movie or look at different stills, my arm was being vaporized as I was allegedly pointing my weapon at the defendant. It's completely inconsistent with the physiology of my wound that he would have shot me while my weapon was pointed at his head.
So here you're allowed to say whatever you feel like you need to say. So you're saying that you actually you weren't pointing your gun at him. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely what I'm saying, yes.
Here you are allowed to say whatever you feel like you need to say. Very nice underhanded way of telling him that he is allowed to lie here. No question at all as to why he gave a completely different take on the witness stand where you can, be guilty of perjury for spewing bullshit.
It wasn't until you pointed your gun at him that he fired, right?
Correct.
And again, no attempt at honest discourse by Good Morning America. Instead, they seem to be actively leading the lies on, even encouraging them, even though we have evidence that everything Gaige said was untrue. And that's the real reason he is saying completely contradictory things during this interview, because here he can say whatever lies he wants. But who knows, maybe Good Morning America will redeem themselves.
And Gaige, what do you want people to know about this case and what happened that night that they may not already know or think that they know?
Very fair and unbiased. Good job, Mr. Schill. Good job.
I think the most important thing to remember is that Kyle Rittenhouse was an active shooter. He murdered 2 men, and he attempted to murder me.
Gaige, Kimberly, thank you both so much for joining me this morning. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Said he wasn't pointing that gun, so a lot to be said for that.
Honestly, at this point, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. With Grosskreitz's testimony the other day, people could easily make the case that he is the one who should be sitting in the defense chair, as he was likely the aggressor in the confrontation he had with Rittenhouse. So of course Grosskreutz has to double down on his victim/hero status. The entire interview has therefore completely been conducted in bad faith. And then of course at the end, Good Morning America just repeats the narrative as if it is to be taken at face value without question. For those of us familiar with propaganda, this is a very common tactic that bad actors use to push false beliefs without any evidence, by refusing to admit or even suggest that there is another side to the question. This is not just my personal opinion or hot take, this is what historians largely agree on. This is, objectively, propaganda. There is no attempt at truth being made in this interview, and the audience is being manipulated into accepting it in a way that circumvents their rational thinking. Really, it's a good thing for these shills that the dislike counter is being removed. And I have to say, as a new and small YouTube channel myself, who has only been here for a few months, I don't feel protected by this change one bit. If anything, the change hurts smaller channels because people can no longer see that we have way better ratios than these propaganda clowns. So I'm sure these paid shills are very happy that they can hide the overwhelming dissatisfaction with their propaganda campaigns from the public. Never mind the fact that the people this change hurts the most is by far you guys, the audience. You guys would probably love to know that a video is bad before putting in the time to watch it. And as far as Grosskreutz goes, he should sincerely feel very fortunate that the mainstream media is willing to shill for his position so badly. In a more honestly conducted case, he could easily find himself on the wrong end of this trial. Being allowed to give such an unopposed take from one side on a major news channel without any kind of pushback at all is generally unheard of in self-defense cases like this. In conclusion, this is a textbook example of how far journalistic standards and ethics have fallen in recent years. No attempt at impartiality, no attempt at factual reporting, absolutely pathetic. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like or subscribe. Or if you hated it, feel free to dislike. Not that the button does anything anymore. We're doomed.